Have you guys ever watched someone, not you, break a bone before? Yep. Anybody ever seen it happen? The bone is sticking out of the arm or leg. Oh, you what? Okay. With this? Yep. The first time or the second time when she was hard breaking and yeah. So wasn't that you? Wasn't that you?
The first time was his fault. So you definitely saw it.
So we have stories that we can tell of people breaking bones or being injured. I have one story. I've actually never seen somebody break a bone before. I hope that never happens. But I have seen crazy things happen being like in band camp and everything when you have people that don't take care of their bodies and they're out in 99-degree heat in the hottest part of the day. Things are going to happen, right? Things are going to happen. I saw one time a color guard member had a rifle, not a real rifle if you don't know what marching band is, and she was wobbling already, yeah? And I saw the color guard instructor start to walk towards her because he could tell she was not in good shape. And she went to toss her rifle, and as it went up in the air, like girl just went straight to the ground. And I went to Greenwood High School. We practiced on a blacktop, and we're not on grass, so she ate it, okay? Sorry if that was too loud. Sorry, YouTube. But she ate it. But the doubly concerning thing was there is a rifle in the air, yeah? And it's coming straight down. And luckily, the color guard instructor saw it coming, and one of the most athletic feats I've ever seen, jumped over the person on the ground while catching the rifle and stuck the landing. It was pretty sweet. One of the things I'll remember for the rest of my life. But in that moment, the person that saw it happening, what did they do? They acted immediately, right? When we have stories of people who have broken bones or gotten injured, what happens? The people around them, they go to them and help them immediately, right? They don't stand back and say, well, they kind of had it coming, she probably should have been drinking water. Getting lightheaded, you probably should have taken a break. Go sit down for a minute, yeah? But what we don't do is run away when those things happen. We draw close and we help someone who is hurt. And this is kind of where we're getting at in the final chapter of Galatians, especially in the first 10 verses here. Because spiritually, Christians are supposed to respond to people who fall exactly the same way we do when they fall physically. Okay? It's the same thing. We don't ignore them. We don't shame them. We don't gossip about them. We don't excuse their sin. What do? We go to them and we, as we're going to learn in verse 1, we restore them. Okay? So for 4-5 chapters, Paul has been talking about, the law, the gospel, faith versus works. Last week we talked about spirit versus what? Flesh, yes. And this battle that's going on and how we can walk by the Spirit. And when we do that, we will bear fruit in our lives, the fruit of the Spirit. We've been doing devotionals every single day. Somebody asked me, how are you writing those? I'm not. They are Warren Wiersbe devotionals. I can send you links if you want to look them up because I'm already writing enough. So if you want to, yeah, I'll send another one tonight. I gave you all the day off yesterday, Sunday. And so I'll send one. I think Goodness is tonight. And we'll finish that out this week. But for especially the last chapter we were talking about, walking by the Spirit, flesh versus the Spirit. And the big idea of chapter 5 was, what does a Spirit-filled life look like? Yeah. What does a life filled with the Spirit, how does that look? How exactly do I live this truth out? And tonight when we get into chapter 6, he's now going to start talking about what does a Spirit-filled church look like. When we have an entire body of believers that are being filled up with the Spirit, when we all are bearing fruit, what does this church look like? What does this body of believers look like? And so that's where we get into verse 1 of chapter 6 tonight. And I'm actually going to read a couple verses before that in chapter 5, starting in verse 25. Because it's very similar to the chapter before this. A lot of commentators believe chapter 6 should actually start a couple verses before. chapters and verses were not added till hundreds of years later. This was just literally a letter of paragraphs. I don't know if you knew that. But a lot of people believe chapter 6 should probably start a couple verses before. So we're going to start in verse 25 of chapter 5, and then I'm going to read through verse 1 of chapter 6. Verse 25, if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another or envying one another. Remember, when I said this legalism that they were being tempted to follow, what happens? It leads them to compare themselves. And comparison creates competition. Competition destroys community. Do you remember that? Yeah? It all starts with comparison. And when we do that, we become conceited. We'll provoke one another. We'll start envying one another. Start saying, God, why don't you give me what they have? And that creates an unhealthy, toxic environment in the church. And so that leads us into chapter 6, where we talk about the body of believers. Verse 1, brothers and sisters, if someone is overtaken in any wrongdoing, you who are spiritual, restore such a person with a gentle spirit, watching out for yourselves so that you also won't be tempted. That word right at the beginning of the verse, brothers and sisters, is actually one word in the Greek. It's adelphoi. This is talking about a family of believers. So right off the bat, he is giving us a picture of family. He's saying this is what families do. Do you understand? This is what families do. And he says, if someone is overtaken in any wrongdoing, that word overtaken, if you just picture someone running a race, and they're catching up to the finish line, but at that one moment, sin was a little bit faster than they are and caught up to them. Okay? That's kind of the picture Paul is drawing here. This isn't a person that's proudly celebrating their sin. This is a person that was running well and sin caught up to them and overtook them. This is someone who needs to be rescued. So what do we do with that person? Paul says we restore such a person. That word there, if I can talk about bones being broken again, that word we use a lot when we're repairing a broken bone. Back in the book of Matthew, you see it in a different context. Jesus is calling the first disciples, and he comes up to some fishermen who were done for the day. Their fishing nets were all in disarray because they had been flipped here and there, got hundreds of fish. They're getting them all out. What are they doing? They're restoring their nets back to, their original intended purpose so they can what? Use them again tomorrow. They are mending their nets. It's the same word being used here. And it's in the same way that we set a broken bone. We are returning something to its original intended purpose. Now, when you break a bone, the doctor doesn't say, just put some ice on it, right? The doctor doesn't say, hey, just make sure don't walk on it, don't stay active, it'll heal itself. Okay? I hope they don't say that. Yeah? Because if you do that, it might heal, but it's probably going to heal in the wrong way. Yeah? And your arm's going to be looking janky the rest of your life. Yeah? That's just not a good picture. Right? He says, what does the doctor say? He says, let's put a what? A cast on it. Let's put something on it that keeps it tight. Let's surround it with something that forces it to stay in the right position so that it heals the right way. Yeah? And a lot of times in church, I see people fall, and what happens? We run away from that person. Yeah? We isolate them. We say, all right, well, I'm not gonna mess with them right now. Oh, they're back in that sin again? Oh gosh, I gotta stop hanging out with that person. But this is a believer that's running the race for Christ, and they fell into a sin, and as soon as they fall into it, everyone just abandons them, right? That's not what the church is supposed to be. That's not a Spirit-filled church. A Spirit-filled church does not run away when a believer falls. What do? We run to them. We surround them, right? Because if we're not around them, they might think they're healing, but they're healing in a completely wrong way. And then they come back to church and they got all this stuff that they have not worked out when they come back to church. But if the church surrounds them We're making sure we're healing the right way. We're making sure that we're going to Jesus with everything that we've got. That's what he's saying here. We restore these people. How do we restore them? He says, you restore such a person with a gentle spirit. These verses are like a snowball. Once we get through the first two, it's like a sprint. Okay, so don't worry. In a spirit of gentleness, that's how we restore them. Now, notice that word. Actually, two words. Spirit, right? We've been talking a lot about that. The spirit of what? Gentleness. Where have we seen gentleness before? Last week in the fruits of the Spirit. Exactly. Good job. We saw it just last week. So, how do we restore somebody? With gentleness. How do we get gentleness? With you guarding your own walk and the fruit of the Spirit being born in your life. When we are following the Spirit, we are being equipped with what we need, not just to handle our problems, but to help other people with their problems too. When you are healthy yourself, you are helpful to others. Does that make sense? The healthier you are, the more helpful you are in your surroundings and with the people around you. But we have to lean on the Spirit with it. We have to have this spirit of gentleness. We cannot restore someone in the flesh. We can only restore them by the Spirit. But an important disclaimer, caveat, whatever you want to call it, right at the end. He says, restore such a person with a gentle spirit, watching out for yourselves so that you also won't be tempted. This scares a lot of people off from helping someone who falls in the church because they're worried, oh, if I get too close to them, I'll fall into the same sin. This reminds me of when I was a teenager. I would cut grass every weekend at my house, and we had a really, really big yard. Like me, my brother, and my dad had to tag team it, and it took all day still. Push mower. It was 3 acres with a push mower. It's a lot of fun. Lots of fun. But one day, I was cutting, and we had not cut it in a while. It might have been the first cut of the year, actually. And I did not realize it, but I ran over. It was a hole in the ground. All I saw was a hole in the ground. I'm like, oh, it's a weird hole. Yeah. Next thing I know, I'm getting hit on my ankle, and it's a yellow jacket. And so I'm like, golly, yellow jacket. And I go a few more steps, and then I'm getting lit up head to toe. So what do? I run. Yeah, I run. I'm not just running. For some reason, I think taking my clothes off is going to help. So I rip my shirt off, my shorts. I'm just in my boxers. I'm ripping my shoes. I don't know why. Because when you're in a moment like that, you go crazy. And for some reason, I thought if I run into the house, I'll be good. They followed me into the house. So now what happens? Now they're stinging my dad, my mom, my brother, my sister, right? And we're all getting stung. And my dad, for the next hour, was chasing down yellow jackets with a shoe and just killing one after another after another. And then when he finished, I'm in there, I can't remember, I was like 14, 15, I don't know. But I probably had 20, 25 stings over my whole body. It was really bad. And my dad came in the room, I'll never forget this. And he said, I know you thought you were doing the right thing, but when you came in the house, you put all of us in danger too. So if that happens again, you need to stay outside, right? so that you're the only one getting stung, right? He said, don't be bringing that in my house again. I'm glad the church is the opposite of that, right? Because a lot of times we can look at people and say, don't bring that in here. Yeah, well, leave that at home. We're just here to sing songs, get your 3 points, go home. Yeah, and it can become really toxic inside of a church when we say just leave the problems out there, don't bring them in here. But if you want true healing, you have to bring it in here. You have to come in with your troubles. The beauty of it is you get to leave it at the altar and you leave differently. You come in with your hands full, you're bringing something. But what you bring, you lay down at the altar and you leave with your hands open. And when your hands are open, what are they able to do? They're now able to help others. Yeah? This is a picture of the church. We have to watch out for ourselves when we're helping someone. Why? Because it says we could also be tempted when we go in. Now, what Paul's saying here, he's saying that sometimes people are more eager to correct others than themselves. Jesus mentioned this in Matthew chapter 7 when he said you need to worry about the log in your own eye before you worry about the speck in your brother's eye. Do you remember this? This is in the Sermon on the Mount. The picture I see is like a firefighter running into a burning house. Someone like AJ, who pulls up to a house, it's burning, there's someone in the house who can't get out. Their first instinct is not, well, hope they can get out. No, it's literally his job to run into the fire. But what does AJ not do before running into the fire? He's not taking his helmet off, getting his fire suit off. Okay, now I'll be more free. I can now move around more. No, he's putting himself in just as much danger doing that. Like that's not being very smart. You keep on your gear. You keep on your guard. You keep on your armor when you go into the fire to bring that person out. And that's what he's getting at here in verse 1. He's saying you got to make sure your heart is guarded when you go in there. You got to make sure you're taking care of your walk, because when you're not healthy, you're not helpful, right? We have to take care, watch out for ourselves. But we have to go into the fire. We have to help our brothers and sisters. He keeps going in verse 2. Carry one another's burdens. You've heard me mention this verse many times. Carry one another's burdens. In this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Other translations would say bear one another's burdens, right? You lift them. You handle it together. You're sharing someone else's weight, okay? Now, this word burden here, this isn't just like helping someone bring the groceries inside, okay? That's not a burden. He's talking about a heavy load, a crushing weight, the kind that a person physically cannot or spiritually cannot carry on their own. They can't do it on their own. They have to have help. He's talking about things like grief, addiction, temptation, depression, things like these. These burdens. Spiritual warfare is another one where we physically can't carry them all on our own. We need help. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about these burdens. And when we help someone with their burden, what does he say? He says, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Now, the Judaizers were trying to point to Moses and saying, you take care of you and don't worry about anybody else. And when you start doing it that way, when you're like, I'm just going to follow all my rules, what are you going to do? You're going to start comparing. You're going to start looking at others and say, okay, well, I'm not doing enough. I got to do more so I'm as good as that person. But then what happens when you get to the level of that person? You say, all right, I guess I could be doing more, but at least I'm not as bad as that person, right? And we start comparing our walks to each other. And that's a dangerous place to be. What Paul's saying here is we are all, as believers, living Spirit-filled lives, and we are called to walk them together. And when we do that, he's introducing a different law here. We are fulfilling the law of Christ. He's taking like a jab at the Judaizers here by saying the word law. But when he says the words law of Christ, what's he talking about here? He's pointing back to Jesus it's John chapter 13. It's the final night that Jesus has with his disciples before he goes to the cross the next day. And he's talking to them, preparing them that, I'm about to leave. And you need to be prepared for that. And he's given them all this advice and what to do once he leaves, saying, there's a helper coming, talking about the Holy Spirit. But one thing he does tell them is he says in John 13, verse 34, he says, love one another as I have loved you. Love one another as I have loved you. There's a reason that love is the first fruit of the Spirit mentioned, right? Fruit, when you think about it, all the fruit in your life, love has to be the foundation of it. Love has to be the foundation because it was love that sent Jesus to this earth. It was love that sent Jesus to the cross. And now love is the stirring motivation behind every act of the believer. If you look at verses like Ephesians, hey, we actually are in Ephesians tonight. Ephesians 5, verse 1, it's one of my favorite verses of all time. He says, therefore be imitators of God as dearly loved children, and walk in love as Christ also loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. If I'm called to be an imitator of God as his child, and God is love, right? God is love. It's who he is. If I'm called to imitate him and he is love, then I need love to work its way more into my life until I am defined by it. Until when people ask about Taylor Strutton, they're like, man, say what you want about him, he loves people. That's what a lot of people say about Radiant Church. They're like, I can't tell you anything that happened on Sunday, but all I know is I was loved. Like everybody there loved me. They loved on me. And that's what I tell our leaders all the time. We're like, hey, we're just loving on these kids. You know, they're going through a lot of stuff throughout the week. They just need an hour or two in the middle of the week where they have a godly influence and someone just tell them, hey, I love you. That might be the only time they hear that sentence all week. And it's coming from someone that is sent by God. That's powerful in a student's life. Telling someone you love them. And we need to be defined by the way we love. And one way we do that is by carrying one another's burdens. All right, let's start getting some traction and build up some speed here. Verse 3. For if anyone considers himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. He's getting right to the heart now, okay? Because pride will destroy restoration. Because if we walk into these situations with pride, we're still going to have the comparison competition disorder going on. You know, I've heard of OCD my entire life, obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of Christians have OCD, obsessive comparative disorder. A lot of us have that, where we naturally start comparing ourselves and we start defining how fast or how slow I want to walk with God based on how far or how fast or how slow my best friend's going. And it's not the way we do it. Because if you're doing that, if you're looking at your life that way, you're going to come to a moment where you're like, man, I'm walking good. And you're going to start thinking you're something. But in reality, nothing. He says, if someone thinks they are something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. He's saying, if you're basing all of this on works, it's nothing. The book of Isaiah, God says, your righteousness is like filthy rags to me. I will not tell you what filthy rags actually meant in their culture, because it is one of the most disgusting things you've ever heard of. If you like to know, you can ask me after, deep dive after dark, and we'll talk about it then. We'll talk about it then, after the storm. So pride, it kills restoration, because the proud person thinks I'm above that. I don't want to get near that. I'm better than that. But the humble person will look at it and say, without God's grace, that could be me. I'm one decision away from that being me too. Verse 4, let each person examine his own work, and then he can take pride in himself alone and not compare himself with someone else. He says, test your own work. What's he saying? He's saying, stop measuring yourself against other people. Measure yourself before God. That's the only thing you should be worried about. The only thing you should be comparing yourself to, well, two things. You should daily say, how do I compare to Jesus? I still got work to do. All right, let's go. The other person you need to be comparing to, listen to this, is the person you were yesterday. Because a lot of us, we're content with being on the same level as yesterday. When God gave us new mercy today, God's Spirit is wanting to move and go to work today, yet I'm content being where I was yesterday? No. I need to look more like Jesus today than yesterday. I can't keep measuring myself against other people. I measure myself before God. if I'm comparing myself to others, I will choose to compare myself to people who aren't as far as their walk as I am. That will breed complacency and laziness in our life. But if you compare yourself to God, there's always work to do. Verse 5, for each person will have to carry his own load. Now, honestly, okay. Honestly, no. We'll see if it comes. We'll see it come through on the mic. Nope. Okay. Look at verse 5. For each person will have to carry his own load. When I was doing my study of this a few months ago, I read that and I'm like, hold up. Isn't that an exact contradiction to verse 2? Where it says, carry one another's burdens. And then literally 3 verses later, it says, for each person has to carry his own load. Is that not a direct contradiction there? This is why it's important to actually look into the original languages of the Bible, because the Greek uses 2 different words there. It's not a contradiction at all. In verse 2, when we see the word burdens there, he's talking about an overwhelming burden, a crushing weight. But then we get to verse 5, and when he talks about you carry your own load, he's talking more of like a backpack, almost soldier terms, like a soldier's pack, what you need for the battle. This is something each person is expected to carry, okay? His point here is saying there are some things only you can do. You can't ask someone else to pray instead of you praying forever. So many students, they'll come up to me and say, hey, can you be praying about this? And sometimes I just ask them, I'm like, have you been praying about it? And I'm met with no a lot of times. And I'm like, so you're not willing to pray about it, but you want everyone else to pray about it. You see how that can, yeah. You can't ask someone else to obey for you. Nobody else is walking your walk. Your father's faith, your mother's faith can't save you. You have your walk to walk. But when life becomes crushing, that's when the church steps in. When we're hiking, everyone carries their own backpack. Everyone brings their own water, right? But if someone falls and breaks their leg, everyone comes alongside them and helps carry them, yeah? That's Galatians 6. Everybody brings their own equipment for the walk, but when someone falls, we pick them up. All right, verse 6. Verse 6. He starts to transition here a little bit. And it seems like he's completely changing topics. But remember, this is one letter. It's one train of thought here. So everything's connected. The first 5 verses, they were all about restoring believers. Okay? Now, the next 4 or 5 verses, he's not talking about restoring believers. He's talking about investing in believers. Okay? Verse 6. Let the one who has taught the word share all his good things with the teacher. Now, if I was a prideful pastor and I was asked to preach on a Sunday, I'd pick that verse, because I would stand up there and say, let all of you who are taught the word share everything you have with the teacher, right? Anybody got a beach house they want to give me for a week, you know? Anybody want to bless me today, right? I would use that so far out of context right there, you know? But when you look at it in context of what we're talking about here, there's a phrase in culture and in the judicial system, no one is above the law. No one's above the law, right? In the Spirit-filled life, no one is above temptation, yeah? And that includes your pastors. That includes your teachers. That includes your mentors. Anybody with anybody can be tempted. Anybody can fall. It can happen to anyone. And so he's saying there, remember to actually invest in your teachers as well. Don't just think about the brothers and sisters that are around. Think about the ones that are leading you too. What can you do to help them today? What can you do to serve them today? What can you do to make their job a little easier so they can spend more time focusing on the work of the ministry? That's why deacons became a thing in the book of Acts, is because there were so many needs in the church. The leaders of the church had no time to spend in the word and in prayer. And so they created a help system, and they called them deacons, to help carry that burden for the ministers, to where they could spend more time in the word, spend more time in prayer, spend more time in preparation for the work of the ministry. That's what he's saying here, right? He's not talking about like, hey, your pastor needs a pay bump. Like, that's not what he's saying here, okay? I'd like one, but I'm not going to ask for one, you know? He's talking about valuing faithful ministry. You get into verse 7, and we're going to start getting into very famous verses that you've heard before. He says, verse 7, "Don't be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a person sows, he will also reap." We have all heard this before, right? You reap what you sow. Yes, one of the most quoted verses in the Bible. Now, at the beginning of this, he says, don't be deceived. When you see Paul say something like that, pay attention, all right? He's saying you've got to get this right. He says God is not mocked. You cannot fool God. You can fool people. You can make them think you've got it all figured out on the outside, but God sees your heart at all times. He sees your motives at all times. He knows all of your thoughts. He knows all of your ways. You will not fool him. He knows if you're trying to do verses 1 through 5 with a bad heart. He knows. He will not be fooled. He cannot be mocked. And he says here, whatever a person sows, he will also reap. Whatever you plant eventually grows. Every farmer knows this, right? But if you plant corn, should you expect peaches to grow? No. Very good. Very good. School starts tomorrow. They're ready, Chuck. They're ready. But the thing about the harvest, it's rain. We've seen it a million times. The thing about a harvest, it happens later, right? It happens after the planting. It does not happen in a moment. It takes time. You don't plant a seed today and expect fruit tomorrow. Sin works the same way. But so does righteousness. If you plant good seeds, you can expect good fruit. It won't happen today, might not happen tomorrow, but it will eventually happen. We'll get there in a few verses. But what else happens in a harvest is you can plant one seed and you can get hundreds more just from that one seed. Those choices will multiply. And a harvest will happen according to the seed as well, which means if you sow small acts of bitterness, eventually you're going to reap a hardened heart towards people. If you sow small acts of generosity, you will reap a transformed life down the line. I promise you. You will reap what you sow. Verse 8, because the one who sows to his flesh will reap destruction from the flesh, but the one who sows to the Spirit will reap eternal life from the Spirit. We've been talking about the flesh. We've been talking about the Spirit. The flesh will promise life, but it will grow death. It just took out our AC, I think. But when you look at the Spirit, not the rain, when you look at the Spirit, sometimes it will feel costly, but it will grow eternal things. So throughout all this, Paul isn't teaching salvation by works. He's saying you will have evidence of a transformed life. Verse 9, one of my favorite verses. Let us not get tired of doing good, for we will reap a harvest at the proper time if we don't give up. I used to look at that when I was 22, and I'm newly married. I'm brand new in youth ministry, and I'm like, why would I ever grow tired of doing good? And then I was 3 years into Radiant, and COVID hit, and I'm doing youth online, and we had a newborn baby, and Sarah's teaching kindergarten online which was a thing during COVID. And all these things keep happening one after another. And I understood. I'm like, oh yeah, you can get tired doing good too. It will happen. But it's in those moments when, I plan all week for a Bible study, and then I'm waiting on the Zoom call by myself for students to show up. And then I see Chloe come up on the screen, and it's obvious that her parents forced her to do it, And then like one more kid hops on, and they're like, hey, I can only be here for 5 minutes. And it's in those moments where it's like, I'm like, God, I worked 5 hours on this Bible study this week, and 2 kids showed up. One's about to leave, and the other doesn't want to be here. And I'm like, what do you want, God? Like, what are we doing? And it was those moments where I had to trust. I had to keep showing up and keep sowing and keep sowing and keep sowing. And just 5-6 years later, we have a great leadership team, most of them former students in our youth group. And they're pouring into our students every week. And, we're seeing a harvest. We're seeing a reap. And I believe that's about to happen in a lot of areas in our church. We're about to start sowing a lot of seeds in our young adults. And I hope something happens there. And I think worship is about to explode at this church in an awesome way. And I can't think about the future and just expect if I just keep showing up, it'll happen. No, I have to keep sowing seeds. And you think about where, you all have goals, you all have plans, but when you look at where God's taking you in life and you think, okay, I can just hang out for 20 years and then all this is just going to happen one day, it's not going to happen. God is expecting you to sow some seeds. God is expecting you to show up. God is expecting you to pursue the Spirit and pursue Jesus every single day. If you look at farmers, they never plant a seed and then dig it up the next day to see if it was growing, right? That would not make any sense at all. They have to keep watering it, keep showing up every single day and keep watering it, keep taking care of it. And for a long time, they will see nothing happen, but they keep showing up and they keep being faithful with it. And then one day, they see something sprout from the ground and then fruit comes from it. And that is something that is easy to say, but hard to live. It's easy to say, all right, yeah, keep showing up. Let's keep watering. Let's keep taking care. Let's keep tending to our heart. Let's keep becoming more like Jesus. And then real life happens tomorrow. And all of a sudden, it's really hard to apply it. It's hard to keep watering when you see nothing coming up from the ground, but you have to trust the process. A lot of us quit because we expect instant results. But God is doing work underground that you won't see for a long time. And one day it will appear and fruit will come from it. And that's why he's saying, don't get tired of doing good. People are going to fall in the church. Keep showing up for them. Keep restoring them. Keep pursuing the Spirit. You will see something happen if you keep showing up. And then verse 10, our last verse tonight. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us work for the good of all, especially for those who belong to the household of faith. He says, as we have opportunity. I love that because he doesn't say, do good when it's convenient. Don't only follow the Spirit when the Spirit lines up with your schedule. Yeah? Because God will wreck your plans. The Spirit will wreck your plans. The more you seek God in His Word, the more you pray to Him, the more you seek the Spirit every day, the more you're going to see opportunities to serve Him. The more you're going to see Him in your life. And he says, especially to the household of faith. Why is that? Is he saying we should bolt the doors shut and just sing Kumbaya for the rest of our lives? No. Is he saying do away with missions, only care about the people inside the building? No. What's he saying? He's saying we need to make sure the church is being restored. We need to make sure the church is unified, because when the church is unified, it carries more power when it leaves the building. A church that is divided, a church that is torn, a church that is not restoring believers will have no effect on the community that it is in. You want to affect Travelers Rest and Greenville for Christ? We need to start guarding what we have here. We need to start taking care of what we have here. We need to start building each other up in this building so that we can be effective for Christ out there. Because this is a family. This is a house of the Lord. It's a house. And we must protect this house, Chuck. That was an old Under Armour slogan. Yeah, it's the old Under Armour slogan. Now, when we look at the big picture here, I want to kind of bring this into our lives and what's happening around us. We're going to talk to a lot of people that might not believe what we believe. My daughter is coming face to face with that realization as she is in public school now. And she just asked her friend, beside her, where do you go to church? I go to Radiant Church. And the kid was like, what's church? I don't know. And she's just like, what? It's where we go to worship God. And he's like, who's that? And she's like, all right. And then she goes to her teachers like, hey, when are we going to chapel? Because this kid needs to hear about Jesus. And they're like, we don't do that here. And she's being introduced to the real world right now. But we think about where we are in life. We've got students in the room. We've got, people who have jobs in a lot of different avenues of work. And we want to make an impact where we are. I want to make an impact for Christ. I want people to see Jesus in me. Well, something Jesus said to his disciples back in John 13, he said, by this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. People are watching how you love. People are taking note of how you behave. For some reason, people have a bigger microscope on Christians than any religion in the world. And they are watching you, and they cannot wait for you to fall so that they can project it to the entire world. But one thing that makes us different from everyone else in this world is that we just love in a different way, because we love with the love of God. Oh, that was a good one. You might have heard that on the mic. It's really hard to hop back in and do this. So when we look at loving others and bearing one another's burdens, one thing to remember, and I'll close with this, is that we don't bear burdens just because kindness is something I have to do. I don't do it just because it's another check on the checklist. I bear burdens, we bear burdens because Christ first bore our burden. Isaiah 53 says, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. And that same Savior who carried our greatest burden is now calling his people to carry one another's burdens. And you might think, man, helping this person out in their struggle, it's going to make life harder for me right now. I'm going to add more weight onto what I already have going on. But guess what? It's going to make their walk a lot easier. It's going to take a weight off their shoulders. And if you can keep eternity and the gospel in view at all times, you will see when you're carrying burdens, you're going to realize God will never ask you to carry a burden that is heavier than the one he carried for you. He will never ask you to do something to forgive someone that exceeds what he had to do to forgive you. Does that make sense? And I know people do terrible things. I know that it's really hard to forgive people that do things to us in our lives. And there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. That's another talk. But when you put it into perspective of me forgiving this person could happen in a conversation, in a decision. God's forgiveness for me cost him his son. And that shows the level, the lengths he was willing to go to show me his love. And if that's what he's willing to do, and that's the type of love he wants to make manifest in me, man, like I want to have that level of love. I want to love people in the same way that God loves me. I want to restore my friends that are falling. I have friends that were in youth group with me growing up, and a few of them say they're not even believers anymore. You know, that's a hard road to walk in. But some of us, that's not former youth group members. Some of us, that's our family members. Some of it, that's the people we have to share the dinner table with every single night. Some of it, that's our coworker that I have to sit beside, you know? And that person needs to see a love that transcends this world. That person needs to see something in me that draws them closer to God. You have no idea how much you pursuing God with everything you got will impact the people around you. Not just in your church, but in your school, in your workplace, at the gas station, like everywhere you go, you can impact people for Christ. So, this week, I don't want you to ask, don't just ask, what burdens am I carrying? Also ask, whose burden can I help carry? Look around. There are a lot of people carrying things right now. Go up to them in a spirit of gentleness and say, hey, what can I do? How can I help you? If you got a friend that's running away from God right now, or is in a moment where they're struggling with their faith, don't run away from them. Go to them. Help to restore them. Help to show them who Jesus is. Remind them of what God has done. Because a church that walks by the Spirit doesn't simply gather together. We carry people all the way home.